What's up, Hurricanes? You guys were on the verge of being left out of the college football playoff, and now you're one game away from your sixth national title. As much as it pains me to admit it, and you guys better remember this moment. Call your relatives, message your friends, tell them to watch this video, because it's a miracle. And as much as it pains me to admit it, the U is finally back, and we've got a lot to talk about today. There's a lot of things I want to say about that game. Some absolutely crazy stuff. But first, I want to start out by saying this. The ACC should be absolutely ashamed of itself. Only the ACC could find a way to keep a national title contender out of its conference championship. They owe you guys an apology. And you should take that title away from the Duke Blue Devils, and it should be given to you guys. An absolute joke. But who cares? Let's talk about the game. The game blew my mind, and we're going to talk about all the craziness that went down. But first, just a heads up, I need you guys to stick around until the end because I've got something to tell you that will blow your minds about what Miami just did to the SEC and what it means for the SEC. So, what a heck of a game. I know a lot of you guys partied hard last night. I know a lot of you didn't even sleep. And to think, you guys were on the verge of being left out of the college football playoffs. Honestly, it would have happened if you didn't play Notre Dame. If Notre Dame would have lost to someone else, I promise you that Notre Dame would have been in over you. As it stands, I'm not fully convinced that Notre Dame wasn't the second or third best team in the country. But that's exactly why this win over Ole Miss matters so much. Because for the last month, some of the national media has been calling Miami frauds. They looked at the ACC schedule and they laughed. They said you guys didn't have the resume to hang with the big dogs. They said that the loss to Louisville this season was smoke and mirrors, or made you guys smoke and mirrors. The committee was looking for any excuse to drop Miami out of its top 10 rankings. You saw the rankings that happened every Tuesday night. You saw how they jump SEC teams over you. They were begging to put a 3-loss SEC team in over the Hurricanes. That's why the stakes of this game were so incredibly high. This wasn't just about making it to the national championship. It was about validating the entire season. It was about proving that the win over the Fighting Irish wasn't a fluke. Because if you had lost to Ole Miss, you know what the narrative would have been. They would have said that Miami got lucky for a couple of games and then got exposed against an SEC team. They would have said the ACC is a JV league. But you didn't lose. You went out there and beat a team that everyone said could have been faster than you. But even though you won, you have to be honest about the perception. You can feel it in the way that pro-SEC announcers talk about this Miami team. They act like Miami is crashing a party that they weren't invited to. But here's the reality nobody wants to admit. Miami just beat the team that was supposed to be the dark horse favorite. Ole Miss was built for this playoff format. They had the high-powered offense and the defensive front. And you guys took their best punch and didn't blink. So now the question changes. It's no longer about whether Miami belongs in the playoff. The question is who can actually stop this train. Because if you can handle the pressure of an elimination game against an SEC power, then you can handle anything that's waiting for you in the title game. But getting to this point wasn't just about skill. It was about surviving a system that was designed to keep you out. And that survival required a level of focus that we haven't seen in 20 years out of this program. But focus alone doesn't just win championships. You guys showed up and played your tails off. Really quickly, this is our new ACC channel, ACC Football Addiction. Take a moment if you're watching this. We're inching towards 1,000 subscribers. Help us get there with this video alone. I know you guys are celebrating. If you want to see this FSU fan say more nice things about your Canes, even though it pains me, hit the subscribe button. So how about the actual game? You guys honestly dominated that game. You had the ball for 41 minutes. Ole Miss had it for just over 18. If you guys had just run up the middle every single play, you might have won that game by 14 or more. But somehow Miami's coaching staff found a way to snatch a nail-biter out of the jaws of a blowout, which unfortunately for you guys is typical of this staff. You guys already know Mario, for some reason, allows Dawson to do this. The man recruits like nobody else. but boy, oh boy, does he allow some questionable calls. Now, to his defense, I will say the field was absolute trash. There's no excuse for people to be slipping and sliding all over the field. That cost your guys plenty of yards when a running back is sliding down for a loss, just trying to make a simple cut. However, it doesn't fully excuse Mario or Shannon. And them running plays like that quarterback keeper in the last minute, I'm going to tell you guys, the whole world was thinking this staff is going to go stupid at the end and maybe play for the field goal. But to Mario's and Dawson's credit, you guys didn't. You went for the jugular and you ended it and did a great job. But those time of possession numbers were bonkers. So let's actually break down what the time of possession means. 41 minutes is an absolutely insane amount of time in a college football game. That's not just winning a game. That's stealing the other team's soul. You have to understand how demoralizing that is for an opponent. Ole Miss wants to play fast. Lane Kiffin installed, and then Charlie Weiss wants to run 70 or 80 plays and tire you out. But they couldn't do that because they never saw the ball enough. Your offense stayed on the field and ground them into dust. You forced their defense to play 2 games worth of snaps in one night. By the fourth quarter, their hands were on their hips. They were all grasping for air while your guys were still firing off the ball. But this massive advantage created a new problem. When you dominate the ball that much, the score should be something like 35-10. It should be a comfortable evening where the starters get to rest some in the fourth. But with this team, nothing is ever comfortable. We watched drive after drive stall out once it got to Ole Miss territory. We watched field goals happen when touchdowns were needed, and that kept Ole Miss hanging around. It gave them hope when they should have been buried. And that's the terrifying part of the Mario Cristobal experience. He builds these teams that are physically superior to everyone else. He builds offensive lines that move mountains and push guys 15 yards down the field. But the game management always keeps the door open slightly. Every fan felt watching that game the same panic. You were looking at the scoreboard and doing the math. I was. You knew that one fluke play could ruin everything. You were thinking about the ending to that SMU game where a late turnover cost the Canes. You were thinking about every time a clock mismanagement has cost this team. The trauma is real, and it was pulsing through that fan base. I've seen your comments on the video over on the main channel. So when it came down to the final drive, the tension was absolutely unbearable. Everyone in the stadium expected a conservative run up the middle to maybe set up a kick. That's the safe book. That's probably what old Mario would have done. But new Mario decided to roll the dice. He called pass after pass with the season on the line, and a quarterback eventually ran the ball in for the national semifinal winner. If the ball comes loose or a pass is tipped, the season's over. If he throws an interception, you can book your tickets to Cancun. If the blocking breaks down and you take a sack, you push yourself further back. He made high-risk calls that go against a lot of what people think about him, but it works perfectly. It caught the defense off guard because they expected the safe play. He showed that he trusts his players to execute in the brightest moment. But that play call only worked because of what happened in the trenches. You can't give your quarterback freedom to move around and take off running if your offensive line isn't moving bodies. And that brings us to the real story of the game. It wasn't the play calling that won it. It was the pure physical dominance up front. Your offensive and defensive lines dominated. If you guys just catch any of the 4 interceptions that were right in your hands, this game wouldn't have been close. Your defensive backs had great coverage all night. The turnaround for that unit this year has been phenomenal. They just couldn't finish the play. Now, we need to give credit where credit is due regarding the trenches. For years, we've heard that the ACC is soft. We've heard that you can't beat the SEC without SEC size. Well, go watch the tape. Miami's offensive line bullied one of the best defensive fronts in the country. Again, they pushed them around like they were a high school team. You saw SEC defensive linemen getting planted on their backs. You saw holes opening up that a truck could drive through. And on the other side of the ball, it was even worse for Ole Miss. Your defensive line lived in their backfield. They disrupted the timing of nearly every single passing play. The quarterback never had a clean pocket to step into. He was running for his life from the first snap. But the physical dominance highlighted a glaring issue in the secondary because the pass rush was getting home. The quarterback was throwing up prayers. He was throwing balls that should have easily been intercepted. And time after time, the ball hit the ground. You cannot drop 4 interceptions in a playoff game. Those are game-changing plays that you are leaving on the field. If you catch just 2 of those, the game's a blowout. If you catch all 4, it's an embarrassment for the SEC. But instead, those drops extended drives. They gave Ole Miss second and third chances that they didn't really deserve. And a lot of players want to blame, and a lot of people want to blame the players for those drops. But we have to talk about those field conditions again. It is difficult to adjust to the ball when you can't plant your feet. You saw guys slipping on every time they tried to break on the ball. The turf monster was probably the best defender Ole Miss had all night. But even with the drops and the slippage, the coverage was elite. You guys slowed down their deep threat. You forced them to mostly play a dink and dunk game that they hate. But this creates a massive question for the national championship game, because the next team you play isn't going to let you get away with drops. They're going to make you pay for every mistake. You cannot dominate the line of scrimmage and then fail to secure the turnover. That's how you lose heartbreakers. But right now, nobody cares about the drops. Nobody cares about the slippery field because the scoreboard says you won. And that win does something bigger than just punch your ticket to the final. It completely destroys the myth of SEC invincibility. We've been told for a decade, maybe 2, that the SEC is playing a different sport. We've been told that the rest of us are just fighting for the second place. But if you look at the numbers, that narrative is a lie. And I found a statistic that proves it without a shadow of a doubt. So for those of you still watching, thank you for sticking it out. This is what we teased earlier. When I read the following stat, it certainly blew my mind. And I'm going to share it with you. The Southeastern Conference has put 9 teams in the playoff the last 3 years, 23, 24, and 25. 9 total teams. Those 9 respective teams have combined for just 3 wins versus non-SEC teams. 3. Those wins were Clemson, who snuck into the playoff barely, a Big 12 champion Arizona State, and Tulane. Miami has won just as many college football playoff games in the last 21 days as the entire SEC has in the last 3 years. I'd also argue the 3 teams Miami beat were quite a bit better than those 3 teams that the SEC has wins against in the last 3 seasons. Thank you guys for watching today. Now, please do me a favor and subscribe to ACC Football Addiction. We'll see you on the next one.